Hello everyone, Pat on MMA back with another video. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be doing a tier list of all the fighters that won contracts on season 9 of Dana White's Contender series. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed. And just before we get into this, I did want to explain how these rankings are. So we have the obvious guys who I think are going to be top contenders, potential champions. They're going to be up there in the rankings. Then we have the top 10 to 20 guys. Then we have the guys who are high potential, but a lot of question marks surrounding them. Then solid UFC career, but unlikely to be ranked. And then guys I'm just not really sold on yet. Guys I'm just not too high on as of right now. That could change, but we'll see. But with this isn't a necessary ranking for me. This is more of a how they fit into each of these tiers, you know? Because some of these guys, like the high potential guys, they could go one way or another, high ceiling or high floor. But for starting out first, we have a guy like Ty Miller, who I really like a guy like Ty Miller, and I think he's tough because I don't think he has like very high potential, but I could see, you know, top 10 to 20. But I think he's more solid UFC career, but unlikely to be ranked. I don't know how highly I feel about him, but I guess we'll see in the UFC. It's really more matchup dependent. I need to see how he does against some stronger wrestlers. Susurkayev, we have a guy like him. He's probably going to be a top contender. I see him probably breaking the top 10 of his division at some point for sure. I was high on him pre-DWCS. Ramiro Jimenez, he's high potential, but he has a lot of question marks. I think the big thing with him is going to be the matchmaking. We know they like to push the Mexican fighters. That's been a big thing with them lately, and it's been working out pretty well. But I think Ramiro might be matchup dependent. So if he gets some of those matchups early on, I think he could succeed very much so. But if not, it depends, you know, if he gets a stronger wrestler, if he gets maybe someone that can crack, because he does have some weaknesses in his striking defense and in his wrestling. With a guy like Josh Hokett, it's all division based. I think he's going to be top 10 to 20 for sure. He might even end up being a top contender at his division just because of how shallow heavyweight is. But I do like Hokett. I think his wrestling is really good. Louis Lee Scott's a weird one for me. I think he'll have a solid UFC career, but I really don't see him ever going that close to the rankings. His decent potential, but I think he has a couple holes in his game that, you know, like that are going to prevent him from really getting too far. Cam Rouston, I'm honestly not too sold yet, which is crazy because he knocked out a pretty solid fighter in Andre Prochazka in his UFC debut already. But Rouston, I don't know. I wasn't a fan of his first DWCS performance against Torres Finney, and I'm still going to need to see more from him. Jose Delano, though, we have him as a top contender. He is one of my favorite fighters from this season. He was one of my favorite prospects before this season, and I'm super happy we got a guy like him on. Ryan Gondra is an interesting one. He's one I could see maybe floating around in near the top 20-ish of middleweight at his peak, but I think it's more likely that he just has a solid UFC career, never really gets to that close to the rankings, and will just do his thing. Takoto's an interesting one. I'm going to have him at the top of the high potential, but a lot of question marks category, because I'm not sold that he'll be a top 20 fighter at featherweight, but he could very well be even better than that. His power is just so fight changing. The issue is he had some very big cardio concerns on the regional scene, and we're going to have to see how he translates when he starts going deeper into fights now that he's in the UFC. Yakhyayev is a guy I'm also very high on. I'm going to have him right here in the middle of these two. I think that's mostly because of weight class as well. I think Susurkayev might be a little bit better skill for skill, but Yakhyayev is a guy who at light heavyweight I could see really, really going deep in that weight class, potentially even a future champion. Another guy, Manuel Souza, I see him in between the top contender and top 10 to 20 tier just because of the lightweight weight class. I am a big fan of Souza, but he did struggle a lot in his DWCS fight against Christian Perez. I'm gonna keep him in the top contender tier now, but just at the bottom. Then we're gonna move on to Dante Johnson. He's another guy, high potential, but a lot of question marks. We've never seen him fight anything close past the first round. He decimated Darian Abbey on the Contender series, but I definitely do want to see a bit more of Dante Johnson against wrestlers, against, you know, just maybe more technical strikers, guys who have better chins. I want to see how he deals with some adversity, which he didn't really get to deal with yet. Moving on to John Paul Laboznoyani. Laboznoyani is a very interesting one. I think I could see him maybe. Oh, that was weird. I don't know why you went there. I could see him maybe in the top 10 to 20 of his weight class, but I could also see him solid UFC career, but unlikely to be ranked. Welterweight's an interesting one. I feel like he could probably take out some of the guys in that 20s range at welterweight. So I'm going to put him, I think, in the top 10 to 20 tier, just maybe towards the bottom of it. But I do like John Paul the Boys Noyani. I think he's going to be a very solid UFC fighter. Mandel Nallo, he's a tough one for me. I don't think he'll be ranked for sure. I think he's a bit older already coming into the UFC. I saw him have some struggles with Bellator. I think he's a very good fighter, very fun, very high finishing upside, but I don't think he's a guy that's ever going to really hit the rankings. Cesare Oleksiejczuk, he's a very fun one now. I could see him maybe not top contender status, but I could see him top 10 to 20 in his weight class for sure. He's pretty close between these two tiers, but his power is just fight changing. He has really good experience against very good competition on the regional scene, and a guy like Cesare Oleksiejczuk is very looking forward to his debut, in my opinion. Tommy McMillan, though, he's a high potential but a lot of question marks guy as well. He fits right into this category somewhere, but I think he showed a lot of flaws in his DWCS fight, but he also did outlast a very tough fighter, survive a beating early on, come back and win. And I think Magoyan was one of my favorite prospects on the season before it started. And he was short notice, of course, so I do think that played a role. But either way, that's a massive, massive win for Tommy McMillan. So if he can beat a guy like Magoyan and, you know, he can improve, I could see him potentially going far. But as of now, I'm not too high on him. For Carol Ferreau, though, definitely get me Carol Ferreau high on this list. I am definitely a big fan of Carol Ferreau. She has ridiculous power for her weight class. I don't even understand how her power carries the way it does, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what kind of like havoc she can wreak at her weight class, because I think that she hits harder than so many girls at 115 pounds. Moving on to our next fighter, we actually have, of course, Chanel Dyer, Carol Ferreau's opponent. And I actually do think Dyer is going to be pretty good in the UFC. I thought pretty highly of her. I actually did pick her over Ferreau in a close decision. It went the other way, but I honestly wasn't too upset with her performance. It was more the striking defense. I could definitely see her hanging around the top 10 to 20 of the strawweight division. So I think that's where I'm going to put her in there. I could also see her in the solid UFC career category, but I don't know. Samuel Sanchez, though, he's definitely going to go in my high potential, but a lot of question marks category. We didn't get to see too much of him on Dana White Contender Series. If we got to see maybe that fight go a little bit longer, maybe I would put him even higher. But Sanchez, I wasn't crazy high on coming into Dana White Contender Series, and his performance kind of completely turned me into a fan. So I'm very interested to see if that will stick, or if he maybe just had a burst for DWCS. I have to see with Samuel Sanchez. I know a lot of people are very high on him. I'm not quite there yet, but I am definitely a fan. For Larry Douglas, at his weight class at featherweight, it's going to be a bit harder to get ranked, I think. Top 10 to 20 is very viable for him. His power, his discipline. I think he very well may hang around there. He could be a solid UFC career, but unlikely to be ranked as well. But I think I'm going to throw him in this category. I think he probably will hit the rankings at some point. If not, I think he probably sits in the 20s or so. So I won't feel too bad about this, even if it is wrong. Steven Asplin, though, it's going to be tough because heavyweight, you know, knowing the division, there's only, I think there's about 40 fighters in the division now with all these signings. Asplin hasn't fought yet, but I mean, technically going 1-0 in the division could make him very, very close to a top 10 to 20 fighter. But I know I have to consider weight class, but I don't think as highly of Asplin in that sense. So I think I'm just going to have to put him in solid UFC career, but unlikely to be ranked, even if he does end up hitting maybe the 20s and would technically fit into this category. I don't know if he fits in with these kind of fighters necessarily. And for Hector Sosa, he's definitely an interesting one for me as well. I'm not too high on Hector Sosa. I know some people think he could be top 10 to 20 in the weight class. I'm a bit more passive on him. I think he could definitely have a solid UFC career, but I think the rankings are going to be tougher for him to get to. Next, we have Iwo Barianuski, which is a very interesting one because he's another weight class dependent guy at light heavyweight. I could see him definitely cracking the top 10 to 20 of light heavyweight. We just didn't get to see enough of him on Dana White Contender Series. So I think I'm going to put him in the high potential, but a lot of question marks category, because I want to see more of Iwo. He hasn't really faced too much adversity in his professional career yet, and I'm really interested to see how he'll face adversity, because I did think he was going to lose that fight to Ali, and then he kind of just bonked him. So I would have been interested to see how that fight would have went if we got to see more than just 30 seconds of it. For a guy like Tommy Gant, though, it's tough for him because he's older, but I could really see him making some waves. He is a very well-rounded fighter. He has a lot of skills. I don't know. I'm very interested in Tommy Gant because his age is a big thing, but he seems to be rapidly improving, and he started so late. I don't really know with him. I want to put him in the high potential, but a lot of question marks. But the only question mark with him is really his age and how much he'll be improving at that age. But I don't know how high his potential is. Like, I don't see him being a top contender. So maybe I think I'll just put him in a solid UFC career, but unlikely to be ranked category. I think I like Gant, but not that much. And he's in a tough weight class, to be fair. Cody Kovanchek is another guy who I think I'm going to throw in this category because I like Cody a lot. I'm just not too sure how much success he'll have overall at bantamweight. Like I said, I'm a fan of Cody, but it's a tough weight class, and his skill set definitely does need to round out a bit more for him to actually break that top 20, in my opinion. For a guy like Montes Vicious, he is a guy who has a lot of question marks, but I don't think he has too high of a potential. I could see him having a solid UFC career, but not being ranked, but I'm going to put him in the not sold yet category. I'm not too sold yet on Montes. He did KO a guy I kind of liked in Donnie Barbier, but his takedown defense is kind of I don't know how much I feel about. I need to see him against a wrestler. I don't know. I'm not too sold yet on Montes, but we will see with him. Murtazali Magomedov is high potential, but he also has a lot of question marks. I think he's a guy that could easily have a solid UFC career, but unlikely to be ranked. But he's also a guy that could end up surprising and go top 10 to 20, just like he surprised on his Dana White Contender Series fight, taking out Zerker in the way he did. Chavez and Montenegro are both going to go in the not sold yet tier for me. I thought they had a really fun fight, don't get me wrong, and I know they're fighting at women's weight classes that, definitely might be able to use some help and some youth, but I really just wasn't a fan of either of them too much pre-DWCS. I actually did pick Chavez in that fight and technically got it right, but we do know that was a weird decision there. So I don't know. I just don't feel too highly about either of them. I will say, though, if Chavez rounds out her game, maybe starts training with a bit of a better gym, I do think she has a higher ceiling than Montenegro, which is part of the reason why I did pick her in that fight. Javier Reyes is going in the not sold yet tier as well. I'm not really a big fan of Javier Reyes. I don't see him having too much success in the UFC. I wasn't a big fan of him on tape pre-UFC, so I'm not too high on Javier Reyes. And then a guy like Rafael Tobias, I'm also not really sold yet on him. He's a guy that didn't show great IQ in a lot of his fights pre-DWCS, and I thought that he did the same thing DWCS, not the best IQ. Striking isn't the best, not really any power in his hands. He kind of needs the takedown. I think he'll have some problems at light heavyweight. Curtis Campbell's a very fun fighter. I don't know if I want to necessarily put him in the top contender tier, but I do think he'll be a guy that sits in the top 10 to 20 range. I could see him potentially climbing towards this tier as well, but for now, I'm going to put him in the top of the top 10 to 20 range. I like Curtis Campbell a lot. I do think he has some flaws, and I do think once he gets to the elite competition, he will face some problems, but I think he will storm through a bunch of people on his way up. I won't lie. So with Chris Alvidrez, I think he'll have a solid UFC career, but I'm not really seeing him in the rankings. I think he's a fun brawler. He's kind of similar to Ramiro Jimenez, in my opinion, actually. Only I could see Ramiro getting more favorable matchups and, just kind of having a little bit more success in the UFC. And with Alvidrez, I think he's a brawler. I think he's going to have some big knockouts, but I also think he's going to have some fights where he struggles. But we'll see with Alvidrez, because he definitely was a big underdog on Contender Series and proved a lot of people wrong. So he definitely could do the same throughout his UFC run. With Louis Jourdain, I could see him maybe tapping the 20s, but I really don't think he's really going to go too far. I'll have him maybe right next to Cody Kovanchek, right around there, where I think they'll both have solid UFC careers, but I don't think either is really going to be in the rankings. For Damian Pinosh, he's like the definition of high potential, but a lot of question marks. At the weight class especially, I could see him going on an Ateba Gautier-like run. He is an athletic freak that hits like an absolute truck. So I could really see him going on some absurd run, but it really just depends on the kind of matchmaking they give him, because if they give him a tough wrestler, I could see honestly that ending kind of quickly, because his wrestling definitely was a massive issue on the regional scene. Magomed Zainikov, come on. I mean, after that fight, I was a big fan of Lucas Caldas. I'm throwing him in the top contender tier here, right at number 2. I'm a big fan of Magomed Zainikov. I could see him having a big future. I wasn't a fan of his last 2 fights before DWCS, and then he came out and basically erased every worry I had with those 2 fights in his DWCS performance. So there's nothing I really can be upset about anymore. So big fan of Magomed Zainikov here. Adrian Luna Martinetti and Mark Vologden, they're both ranked back to back for me. I don't know how you could rank them that far apart, in my opinion, but I don't know. I'm bordering on not sold yet and solid UFC career, but unlikely to be ranked. I don't know. It was a great fight. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, the fight of the season. Obviously, an incredible fight. I just don't know if either have top tier skills, and I don't know. It was a bit of a sloppy fight, just to be straight up honest. And I think both will find some success in the UFC, so I think I have to put them in this category somewhere. Where in this category, couldn't tell you. Maybe towards the bottom, I guess. But I could see them both maybe finding a little bit of success in the UFC, but really not much. And then Imanol Rodriguez is a guy who I think he's definitely going to be considered a top contender status for me. I'm a big fan of Imanol. I think he's a beast. The loss to Joseph Morales definitely is a slight red flag, but he had a great performance in that fight. I did think it was a close fight, but either way, I do think Imanol. I think Imanol is one of the top guys from this season. I think he has a very high ceiling with a guy like DC, and I think I'm very interested to see if he can actually do what I think he does and break this top 10 of flyweight and potentially enter the championship talks. Luis Felipe Diaz, love the guy, but I definitely have to put him towards the bottom here. He had a gifted opponent. I mean, Hedrick definitely wasn't a great opponent and still kind of struggled. I give him a lot of respect because he took 3 short notice opponents in the lead up to his fight, but I just didn't love his performance. I didn't love him pre DWCS, and I think that he's definitely in the not sold yet tier for me. Luke Fernandez, I think, probably hits the top 10 to 20 of light heavyweight. He's very dynamic. He's had a lot of potential for a been a top US prospect now at light heavyweight for a while. I could definitely see Luke Fernandez hitting this here for sure. Am I gonna put him there though? I think so. I think I'm gonna put him right around where Larry Ann is. I think I feel similarly about them, but then the weight class factored in makes me favor Fernandez, maybe even make me favor him over JPL as well. So something like that feels about right. And then Levi Rodriguez, I'm not too sold yet on Levi. He was getting controlled pretty hard by Vidal before just one shot KOing him. He has that crazy one shot KO power, but he's a bit sloppy. Light heavyweight, like I don't know. He's definitely one that I want to throw in the not sold yet tier. So I think I will. I think he probably would have beat a guy like Rafael Tobias, to be honest with you, but I don't think he would have beat a guy like Iwo. So he's probably gonna fit somewhere in the middle there, but I think he's just probably gonna fit like right here. Juan Diaz is another interesting one. I think he'll probably have a solid UFC career. I don't see him really touching the rankings though. I think he'll be fun. I think he'll be entertaining. I think I mean, we saw the spinning elbow KO. I think we'll have some moments like that, but I didn't know what to think about that performance. It was a bit of an interesting fight with him and Quan. He controlled it pretty well, but I don't know how much higher it made me on him. I wasn't crazy high on him pre DWCS, but it was a very great knockout. Like, I don't know. This may be a low ranking for Juan Diaz. Marwan Rahiki was in probably one of the other best fights of the season, and he got rocked really bad a couple times, nearly KO'd. I want to put him in the top 10 to 20, but there's a lot of question marks based on the DWCS fight that we didn't have beforehand. So I think I'm going to put him in this high potential, but a lot of question marks category. I really do want to say he could easily break the top 10 to 20, but that chin was a bit of a scare. So that's something I'm definitely going to keep an eye on. And then with Michael PQD Oliveira, I do see him being a top contender at the weight class. Where exactly I will rank him, maybe right here, maybe somewhere in this range. This whole range is a bit clumped in my opinion. These 4 could honestly be flipped in any way. Honestly, you could probably throw in just the top 6, 7. This honestly could all just be kind of flipped in any way you want it to be. It's a very close ranking. I know a lot of people are higher on Curtis Campbell as well, so he's a guy that I know I'll probably get some flack for not having at the top contender tier. I am not even done yet, and I'm sitting here going over my list. Wes Schultz is a guy I'm also not too sold yet on. He had a great submission on DWCS, but Minaj was not a guy that impressed me. He also got brutalized by Mansoor Abdul Malik on his first Contender Series appearance. I'm going to need to see more from Wes Schultz before I am sold on him for sure. So this is the overall tier list. We have Delano, Zainikov, PQD, Yakyayev, Farrow, Susurkayev, Manuel Souza, and Imanol Rodriguez in my tier of guys who I think will be in the top 10s of their division at one point or another. And the guys who I think will stay in the top 10 to 20 range at one point: Curtis Campbell, Cesareo Zaechuk, Josh Hokett, Luke Fernandez, John Paul Laboznoyani, Larry Ann Douglas, Chanel Dyer, and then people with high potential but a lot of question marks. Like, I could see a bunch of these guys being top 10 to 20, maybe even like the top 3 of these guys, maybe even 4. I could see being top contenders in their weight class. I don't even know yet, though. I need to see more of them. I need to get a better read, because these 3 all ended the fight by first round knockout, and this one showed some flaws. But then, yeah, this tier is just the guys who I think have a decent amount of potential, but just a lot of question marks. Like, Tommy beat a great opponent. Ramiro got hit a bit too much. Dante is just a brick house we don't know about yet. Murtazali finished it too quick for me to really get a great read on him after his tape gave me mixed reads. Guys like that, I want to see more of them before I really slot them into a for sure opinion. These guys I all think will have solid UFC careers. In my outright rankings, which I also do have, Gant is a bit higher. He is a guy that's higher overall, but I think I might have to move him down just because, thinking about it, the weight class is tough, and with his age, I don't know if he'll be ranked. Honestly, I might have to move up Gant. I don't know. This Gant is definitely a tough one for me. He does have question marks, so he really could potentially fit into this category. I'm going to put Gant into this category. You know what? I'm going to put Tommy Gant into this category. It would make sense with the question marks he has, its age, but I think he's good enough that he has high potential, but just question marks now. In the solid UFC career category, I like Ty Miller, Jordan. I could see a couple of these guys definitely proving me wrong and breaking into that top 20 range, maybe even the top contender range for a couple of these guys. But for the most part, I think they'll just be fun fighters, putting on some fun fights. These two, I don't know. I might not be sold yet on these two. I don't know. I might put Asplund above them for now. Ty Miller, Jordan, Cody Kovanchek, Hector Souza, Louis Lee Scott, Juan Diaz, Chris Alvidrez, Ryan Gondra, Mandel Nallo, Stephen Asplund, Adrian Luna Martinetti, and Mark Vologdin. And then in the not sold yet tier, we have Cam Rouston, Wes Schultz, Levi Rodriguez, Rafael Tobias, Montes Condratavicius, Javier Reyes, Jaisla Chavez, Sofia Montenegro, and Luis Felipe Diaz. So that is all. If you guys want to, screenshot, cook me, do whatever you got to do to, cook me and make it so that, I know how bad these were in like a year's time or whatever, go ahead. These are how I would tier these guys up. Listen, though, these are not my rankings. My rankings are separate. I might actually make a separate video for my straight up rankings, but this is just a tier list and how I think these guys fit into each tier of these for their UFC career. I probably will end up making a rankings video, to be honest, but my rankings aren't exactly like this. Either way, though, my rankings are gonna have mistakes. We'll get to that when it happens, but thank you guys so much. I hope you guys did enjoy the video, and hope you guys kind of like my rankings. Let me know in the comments if you do disagree with any of them and what you disagree with and why, and I hope to catch you all in my next video. Thank you so much.